Okay, it's recording. So, welcome. I'm going to go over general three different subjects, although there's four on the screen. Filter is still sort of inside the function subject. First up, we're going to talk about the grammar and structure of JavaScript. So we're talking about operators, declarations, expressions, and statements. What are these, and how do you actually use them? This is something you already know, but probably some of you wouldn't be able to explain what it is and what it does. So we're just going to explicitate that, so you have a clear understanding of what these things are, even though you probably know them, could use them already. Then we're going to talk about functions, what they are, how you write them, and how you use them. Then we're going to create our own filter function, just like the one most of you probably know, that is a prototype function of array. And then we're going to talk about asynchronous programming, which was requested by more than one person. So exciting. Okay, operators. I would like for you to give me examples of operators. Can anyone unmute themselves and just tell me an example of an operator? I told you I was going to force you to be interactive. Can anyone just unmute themselves and tell me, but it's just a single operator?
You think about plus, minus?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Those are operators. There's a whole slew of them. So most of them you know, some of them you don't know, and some of you will never actually use. But yes, those operators: plus, minus, divide by, times, and also actually equal to. That's also an operator. So I would like for you to take a few seconds to think about what, in your own words, what is an operator? So we had examples, plus and minus. What is it? Just in normal human words, what is an operator? What does it do? What is its purpose? Any volunteers?
I would say it's a mathematical sign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but what does it do? So you're talking about it's something about arithmetic stuff in math, right?
Yeah. So
what does that do? In just in human words? I know it's complicated, but I want you to think about these things. If you were to explain an operator, plus, minus, all that, to a child who didn't know program, who didn't know math, what would you say?
It helps to work with numbers or integers or compare them.
Yeah. Okay. So comparison and working with numbers. So let's talk. Any other volunteers?
Something that changes a value.
That's the one. I mean, yes, you have comparisons as well, which sort of is gray area, but exactly right. That's my explanation of an operator as well. Something that facilitates change. You can operate a switch, you can operate a crank or a vehicle, something that changes whatever is relevant. Exactly right. So I'm just gonna, there we go. So operators come in different types. You have arithmetic operators and you have assignment operators. Not all operators are here. I could fit them in. You can look them up on the internet. We have these four different types: arithmetic, assignment, comparison, and logical. Of course, arithmetic are about numbers and integers and all that, and also strings, but that's only the plus. And then you have assignment. That's in a category for itself because it assigns a value to something else. And then we have comparison and logical, which results in of course, a Boolean, true or false. Okay. On a different spectrum or angle, whatever you want to call it, you have three different categories. You have the unary operators, which, if unary sort of means one, can anyone tell me how many values a unary operator operates on?
One.
One, exactly. Yeah, easy. Okay, so what about binary? How many different values does a binary operator operate on?
2.
Yes, thank you. Starting to work. Great. How about a ternary operator? There's only one. It's not just 4 binary, but there's actually only one ternary operator. How many does it operate on?
3.
3. And now you know why it's called a ternary operator. It's a literal description. It's also called a comparison operator, but I think most people just know it as the ternary operator. Okay, great. That was operators. That's all you really need to know. It's nice to have these names and descriptions in mind when you talk to other programmers. Let's talk about declarations. And again, let's start with examples. Can anyone tell me an example of a declaration? You use them quite a lot. You think about, oh, sorry?
Or you declare a variable?
Yeah.
Maybe?
So can you give me an example of a declaration?
I mean, you create a variable for a class and then you declare it in the constructor.
So you're talking about class. Is just class, is that a declaration?
I would say you declare the variable in the constructor. That's the declaration.
So Christian is saying that let Björn equal MVP would be a declaration example.
Yes, exactly. Let is a keyword that is in the declarations category. So we already have, yeah, okay. I'll give you the first one. So there's var, and then we have let. Let's try to fill them up. In general, there's only 6. So can you give me the rest?
Const.
Const, yeah. Three more.
Number.
Function.
No. Function, yes. No. There's 2 more.
Class.
Yes, thank you. Because the way I made the slides, the class is not the next one, but it is the most obvious of the 2. Actually, technically, from what I could read on the internet, async function is its own declaration. Is that important to you? Not really. I just wanted to include it for completion's sake. And then, of course, you have class. These are the 6 declarations, and they work to declare something. Yeah. So it's yeah. I don't think is anyone fussy on what a declaration is now? Three, two, one. No. Good. Okay. I guess in that case, if you completely understand it, no. Actually, let's have a look. So I'm just going to write this. Is that a declaration? Just const x, is that a declaration?
Well, if you put a semicolon, I guess it is.
Yes.
Kind of is, but in JavaScript syntax, it's not. Because if I try to run this, I'll just show you the error code. It's going to tell me that it's missing an initializer in the declaration. So it is technically a declaration, but when you write it, you also need the initializer. So yes and no, it's kind of confusing. Anyway, okay, let's move on. Expressions. I'm just going to repeat myself. Can anyone, in your own words, tell me what is an expression in programming? You use them quite often, but you don't really hear the word explained. Anyone want to give it a shot? The way I like to think about it is because a lot of things in programming and also JavaScript are named quite aptly from the English language. So what is an expression in the English language? You can have a facial expression, right? That's an expression. And you can have a literal expression, like Jonas walked across the street. It's technically an expression. And what Mozilla, oh, that's one too many. What Mozilla has, how they explain it is an expression is any valid unit of code when that compiles that resolves to a value, one value. Can be any type of value, but only one. So that's pretty much it. Like my facial expression is sort of an expression that resolves to happy. That's a value of my face. And Jonas walking across the street resolves to him being over there. That's how I like to think about it. An easier way of testing if something is an expression is, can you console log it? So console log takes, well, it can take a series of value if you separate it by commas, but if you don't use commas, it takes one value, it takes one expression. In fact, if you try to console log something and it gives you an error code, probably it will say this function expected an expression. So let's just quickly go over some examples of them. And what I want you to do is, I want you all to unmute yourself if you can, and then I'll count down to 3, and then you'll say yes or no. Is this an expression? Okay, so 40 plus 2, is that an expression? 3,
Yes.
2, 1.
Yes.
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 Yes,
Yes.
great. Takes a bit of practice, but I think we're getting there. Great. 40 modulo 4, is that an expression? 3, 2, 1.
Yes.
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 Yes. Great. We're getting there. Okay, so 40 compared to 2 times 20. Is that an expression? 3, 2, 1.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it is. Because you can console log it, and it will evaluate true, right? Because it's the same number. Okay. True and undefined. If you console log that, will it result in a value? 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, well, that's good. That's excellent. That means I'm not wasting your time. So let's try it. Don't mind that I'm using L, just I don't want to write console log every time. So you don't need to know what it results in, just that it results in a value. Okay, so true and undefined. Let's try that. It's not giving many errors. So anyone want to try that up? Is it an expression? It results in undefined. That's a value. That means that this is an expression. Uses the AND operator to see, are both of these true, right? If it's not, well, then return false. It's a little bit tricky because I'm using undefined, but it doesn't matter. It's still a value. So it's still an expression, a valid expression. Okay, let's try 4 more, just for fun. For my fun. 42, just the number 42. Is that an expression? 3, 2, 1.
Yes.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it's a value. It resolves to a value, so that it is an expression. In fact, if you just go 42, it doesn't do anything, but it doesn't give you any errors. So it's a valid expression. Okay. Next one, const x equal to 21. Is that an expression? I'm just going to count very slowly so you can think about it. 3, 2, 1, go.
No.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Yeah, so why yes?
I mean, you could const log x, right?
Mm-hmm.
To see what x is.
Yes.
So
But
if
can
that
you-
is the parameter, then yeah.
Can you const x equal to 21?
No.
So who said no first?
I did.
Why no?
Well, I was just thinking that it would be, I don't know, my intuition said that it would be weird to declare a variable inside the log.
Okay, so let's try it. So apparently a declaration is not an expression in JavaScript terms. Oh, that's good to know, right? So next one. How about x equal to x times 2? 3, 2, 1, go.
No.
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 Why no?
Well, I just thought that it would be the same for assignments.
Declaration.
This is not a bad thought. Let's try it. Of course, this requires the the variable already being declared. So let's log x equal to x times 2. It's not giving me an error. What does that mean?
That is, it's an expression.
That is an expression. Oh, right. I forgot. I had a joke about this. Damn it. Okay, so you can't assign to a constant variable. I forgot about that. Okay, so now it's not a constant variable. Can you see probably? There you go. So this actually evaluates to the number 42. If you console log x afterwards, it's 42. So an assignment operator actually evaluates to a number. This also means that you can actually change these, which is kind of weird. And why would you ever do that? Equal to. You can't do that in the log apparently because it needs one expression. Okay, but you can change, which is weird because it evaluates every assignment from right to left. If that's confusing, just forget it. We'll probably never use it. Okay, last one. An anonymous arrow function that results in true. Is that an expression? 3, 2, 1, go.
Yes. Yes.
Anyone else? It's also fine to say don't know, as long as I know you're not falling asleep. Okay, so let's try it. Okay, so it's not giving me an error. That means anyone?
That is an expression.
It's an expression. What do you think will be console logged when I run?
True.
Anyone else?
True.
No. It's an anonymous function. Because I'm not actually calling this function. We'll go into functions later, but this is a value. This is a value that is an anonymous function, because functions are actually values in JavaScript, also known as first-class citizens is the technical term, but it really just means that they are values. It's a trick question. I tricked you, but it's C nonetheless. Okay, let's go on. You don't need to remember this. I just wanted to log this somewhere in the back of your brain. There are different types of expressions, and an expression can be more than one type at a time. So there's arithmetic, equals to a number. You can have string expressions, values to string, of course, logical, Boolean, and then you have primary expressions. If that's confusing, don't worry, don't need to know it, and I don't feel like I have time to go into the details about it. Just know that there's these different types of expressions. Left-hand side expressions really just is that it's something that where the left side of expression is the destination of an assignment. So that would be something like const x equal to 42. That would be an arithmetic left-hand side expression. You might see some of these words when you have errors and you're trying to find out what's wrong. You might see, well, your left-hand side should be something, right? But it's not important. I just wanted to put it right there. Okay, let's talk about statements. What time is it? Okay, so it's been about half an hour. Do you feel like you need 5 minutes?
No.
No? Good, let's continue then. Okay, so statements is something different than expression. Expressions know that something can be both an expression and a statement. So it's a different thing altogether. It's not, this is one thing, this is another thing. They can be the same thing. Okay. So what is a statement? W3 schools write that JavaScript statements are composed of values, operators, expression, keywords, and comments. That is not useful. That is completely useless, to be honest. That doesn't explain what a statement is. You can find good, proper explanations of what statements are on the internet, but they're quite long, which tells you that it's a bit of a complex subject. You can also find explanations that are just wrong, or explanations that this is a statement. Oh, wait, well, this is a cat. It doesn't tell me what a cat is. What is a statement? Okay. A way to know if something is a statement is if you have Prettier installed, like the auto formatter, and you have it working, and you have it on save, and you click save. Every place that ends in a semicolon, that's a statement. Okay, so that's how you tell what block of code is a statement. I don't want to go to too much detail in the interest of time, but basically a statement is a block of code that is executed in isolation from other code. So the JavaScript program goes gang, 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 right? And then it goes statement, resolve that, another statement, solve that, another statement, just solve that, which is also why you can have something, if you declare a variable after you use it, that's not going to work, because it goes line by line, finding a statement, executes that, next statement, right? So it's chronological how you write it. So it's really just a block of code that is executed, isolated from other blocks of codes that are also statements. Does that make sense?
Yasmin, thanks. Yes.
It makes sense.
Yes, does make sense.
Good. Okay. So let's have some examples. I'm gonna do the little game again. So I'm gonna count to 3 and const x equal to 42. Do you think that's a statement? I should probably do like this. 3, 2, 1, go.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, it's a statement. It executes and then it goes on to something else. So if true, do x. Is that a statement? 3, 3, 2, 1.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's why it's called an if statement. Okay, next one. So this is a function called f, takes the parameter v and executes v++, the post increment operator it's called. So is that a statement? 3, 2, 1.
Yes.
Anyone else? Do you need to think about it? Or is it a general, I don't know, except for that one, yes. Okay, well, let's test it. So when I hit save, if it's a statement, it should end in a semicolon, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Wait, so Bjørn, shouldn't a semicolon be after the, like in line 5? Does that mean that v++ in itself is a statement, or?
Yes. V++ is a statement. This whole thing, that's not a statement.
Okay.
That's a function declaration. It's a little bit confusing, I know, but you can think about it, and we're going to talk about functions. You can think about it that the function isn't executed.
So if we were to initialize the function to or to set it as a variable, so const x equals that function, then it would be a statement, right? The whole part. Yes. Okay. Great.
That's a very good answer. Yes, that's true.
Okay.
Because now f is assigned to a value, and that value is a function, right? Okay. Next one. This guy. Take a few seconds to look at it. Is that statement? 3, 2, 1.
Yes.
Maybe.
Maybe is a few people know about a third Boolean value, maybe. Actually, it is a thing in functional in F#. Anyway, let's try it. So this is actually an operator. This means that something is executed before something else. I hope you know that you have something like 4 times 4 plus 2. The order that this is executed or solved is that there's hierarchy to it, right? Every operator is in a hierarchy, and times, just like in arithmetics, the time symbol is evaluated before the other stuff, unless you go like this. So this is actually a tool you can use to say, do this first, right? And that's not just with plus and minus and times and division. You can actually use it with everything that results, so every expression, you can do this, right? Okay. So we have, what was it? True. And then we have these boys. Okay, so if it's a statement, it should resolve in simple. What? Why is this a statement?
Because it ends in parentheses. That was why I said yes.
Yes, basically. So it's just a little bit like, so we're going to talk about functions later, but basically this calls it. So it actually results in a value, which also means that if you do this, it's also an expression because it results in a value. Anyway, let's move on to functions. It was actually a segue. Do you need a break now, or can I continue? Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, let's continue. So true to the format, let's talk about what is a function. If not all of you, at least most of you have had discrete math in some format. So you know what a function is from discrete math, right? It's only last semester. So what is a function in JavaScript? Well, a function is a block of code that, and what I really want now is for you to unmute yourself. You may think about it a little bit, but I want you to unmute yourself and finish this sentence in your own words in human language.
Now or?
Yeah, just whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm just gonna throw myself into it and say that if a function is a block of code that executes some statements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's sure. It performs a task. Was my version of it. Yours was more technical, which is fine. So maybe you can guess. I wrote it up as a list form, right? So maybe there's a function is more than just that. It's a good answer. But can you think about how do we use them? What is it? What's the purpose of a function?
So it provides some modularity, so we can reuse the same piece of code again, and maybe perform the same task in another context.
It's a very, very good answer. There's a third thing about functions, and you answered the third one. So there's a second one. It's not immediately executed, which is why the function itself is not a statement. So we can sort of prepare it for when we need it, and we can reuse it. The last one that you also mentioned, it is reusable. The reusability of a function is the most important part. It speaks to the whole dry principle. Don't repeat yourself. And shan't go into that one, but it's good. So the most important part of a function is that it is reusable. How does that relate to a discrete math function? Because that really just something that takes something and outputs something else. So it's not really the same thing, even though you call it a function. It's not really the same concept, is it? Anyway, so you can actually write a whole JavaScript file where you don't use the word function once. Don't do it ever. Like I will find you and I will beat you. But you can. Okay. So the syntax. There's 4 ways of writing one. That's 4 ways of writing one. You have the vanilla one, I call it, which is just function, and then you have the parameters in parentheses, and then of course you have the code to be executed. I'm pretty sure all of you know this, so I don't want to spend so much time on it. Then you have the arrow function, which looks like this. You have parameters, and then that leads to, so I think about it, code to be executed in curly brackets. Now, funny thing about this arrow function is it has an implicit return. What does that mean anyway? Can you answer that? Okay, it just means that you can actually, you don't have to use the return. So you can have curly brackets. That means that this is now the code body. There you can return value. Right, let's just make this function. Right, so you can do this, but the arrow function has an implicit return that, which means that you can actually remove this. You can do that if you only have one value, like if it's just one thing, you can also go like, right, so this is a one value. It resolves this, and then it returns it. If you need to do more than one thing, then you have to do with the curly brackets. Okay. Not very important, but you will probably see it in your career. So it's nice to know about the implicit return. Okay, the next one, I've never used it. I don't think you should. I only show it for completion sake. It uses the new keyword, which means that it creates an object from a class, or right. So you go new function, and that's a method call. That's a function call. So you have the parentheses, and then you put inside what the constructor should do. The syntax is you put in parameters separated by commas, and the very last parameter is the code body as a string, which is a bit weird. I guess that's why no one uses it. It's weird, but this code body is equal to this thing, right? You just put it as a string in the end. Weird, no one uses it, don't use it. Then you have a generator function. Now these are quite exciting, but also quite advanced, and front-end developers will probably never use them, to be honest. They allow you to use different keywords such as yield and .next. So if you have had Java, if you know Java and you know an iterator, it's basically the same thing. You can create an object that where you can have generation of values, but you don't generate them yet. So you have this object where you can go next, okay, next. You have complete control over when you get the next value of the iteration. And if you can even make an infinite one that just go while true, return whatever. So not very important, but I do think they are exciting, and I hope I get to use one at some point. Okay, next, the names of these things. I'm pretty sure that you know this. I just want to go with for completion's sake again. Of course, you have the declaration, the function, and then you have the name of the function. This is actually optional. Don't have to have it. Otherwise, if you don't have it, it will be an anonymous function. Right, so it's optional, but that's the function name. And in fact, it is also a property of the function. What do I mean when I say that the name is a property of the function? Anyone care to take a guess? Think about properties. What is a property? You know what an object is, right? Johan.
An object? Did you ask that?
Yes. What is an object? Does an object have properties?
Often, yes.
Yes. Yeah, probably, right. So what is a property in an object?
Say again?
A property in an object, what is that?
Yeah, we also call that attributes. That could be
Yeah.
a name or age, something like that.
So if I try to log, function dot name. This thing is in the way. Right. So the name actually a property of the function is this one. And it's quite useful if you want to do something more exciting and complicated with functions where you call them based on the name and all that. Anyway, it's not so important. I just want to mention it because I think it's cool. So next one is, of course, the parameters. You can have from 0 to n parameters. There's no restriction on that. And then you have the function body. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, can I ask you something?
Yes, please.
You said before that you can name the function something like sum here. But you said it's also possible not to name something. But
yes.
Can we then reuse it if we don't give it a name? I mean, function. That was what we can do with function. But if it has no name, what then?
Yes. You're completely correct, unless you, of course, you assign it to a constant, but that's sort of the same thing, right? You're completely correct. You cannot reuse anonymous functions, which is why we declare them, and so that we can reuse them. So what good is an anonymous function? Well, it can be inside a different function. So, but yeah, no, good question. Okay, so parameters. Function body, this is what is executed. Stop me if I'm assuming that you know this, but I am going to assume that you know how a function works. Okay, so this down here, a bit important. This is a function call. Right, you can recognize it. Where is it? It goes sum and then the parentheses, and then it passes in. Oh, sorry, passes in some values, right? A function call is also called an invocation. You invoke a function. Nice to know the name things, especially when you talk to older programmers who might call things by more technical names. So a function call or a function invocation, invoked function. Okay. So
can I ask something?
Yes, please.
So you said the return a plus b is the function body, but if there were more statements within the function, that would be part of it too, because they're also executed within?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So everything inside these curly brackets, that is the function body. So if there are more lines, that's also part of it. As long as it's inside these, then it's part of the function body and is what gets executed when you call or invoke the function.
Thank you.
Yep, cool. Okay, so these are the function arguments. Now, why is that a different name than the parameters? Can someone venture a guess to the difference between the parameters and the arguments? So it looks the same, isn't it?
The A and B is sort of like the recipe for what you need to complete the function, and then the 1 and 4 is the values you plug in.
Mm-hmm.
As an argument.
Yeah, that's true. So it's abstract and concrete. Cool. That's the correct answer. And now pudding. So in extension to what you just answered, I would like you to take just a couple of minutes while I get some water and look at these 3 images. And I want you to place a JavaScript name or concept, just a couple of words maybe, to what these three things are. If you imagine a function, you said as a recipe, that's how I like to think about it. A recipe that you do in your kitchen, basically same concept as a function, right? You prepare something, and then you do it. So think about that, put some words to each photo, and I will be right back with some water. Actually, if you have something that you think is correct, you can go to the Zoom thingy and click the annotate button. I think it's in more usually, and you can just write it on the screen. Feel free. Anyone feeling adventurous? You can hear me, can you?
Yes.
Okay,
When
good.
you say you could annotate.
It's in the Zoom control bar. If you click more, maybe, or maybe it's just in the whole bar, depending on your screen size. You can click the annotate, so like a pencil, and then you can draw, or you can put in text and draw like this. Mhm. Someone wrote function. Does anyone?
I don't know. I just tried to write something.
No, that's fine. Thank you for participating. Makes it more entertaining for me, at least. Anyone who thinks that makes sense? It's just a recipe for chocolate pudding.
I think it's a function as well.
Good. I agree. Just gonna, yeah. So it's a function. What about the next one? In programming terms, so if that's a function, what's the next image? I hope the
Function
image.
call.
Yes, exactly. It's a function call. What about the last part?
What is returned by the function, or?
Yeah, it's return value. So it's what is there after you call it. So it's at runtime. So yes. Great. Does that make complete sense to everyone? Please be brave. Speak up if you think, but that's weird. That doesn't make sense. Why is this a function? Okay, I'm just going to assume that you are brave enough to speak up. That's how I like to think about functions, sort of recipes and cooking and return values and chocolate pudding. Very important. Okay. I have some examples in VS Code, and what I want you to do now is I want you to tell me if something is a valid function. Is it going to give me any errors when I uncomment this one? So the first one, you can read it, function f1 with a parameter, and then I just console log the parameter. Is this a valid function?
Yes.
I'll say yes too. Yeah.
Anyone else? So I'm assuming the rest don't know, because of course you're brave enough to unmute yourself, speak up, unless of course you're in a work environment and you can't speak. So if you don't know whether or not this is a valid function, I suggest doing a lot of reading and a lot of writing. I don't mean to scare you, but this is the most basic a function you can get, really. You have the function keyword, you have the name, parameters, and the body. So yes, this is a valid function. Okay. How about the next one?
Can I ask something, Bjørn?
Yes, please do.
And then the first function here, because you only do one thing, you can do it without the curly brackets, or was that what you were saying before? Okay.
No, that's an arrow function.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sure.
This one does not have the implicit return, so you can't do this.
Okay. Good to know.
But it's a good question.
So that's about how you write the function in the syntax, or that you have to do it with an arrow, or is it a different sort of function when you do the arrow? I'm pretty sure, I haven't actually examined it, but I'm pretty sure that if you write this kind of function and then an arrow function, and you do the same thing with it, it's going to compile to the same ones and zeros. Okay.
When, like, if you look at the binary, it's what is known as syntactical sugar. It makes no difference in the code that is run. It's about how you write it. It's for your sake.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But of course, the implicit return that we just talked about does make it a little bit different in how you would use it, or can use it. Anyway, next function. This one, when I uncomment it, will it give me an error code?
Sorry, Bjørn. You also have a question in the chat.
Yes.
So Yasmin writes, so you don't actually need an explicit return statement or return keyword?
Not with an arrow function. So I have an example of it here. Okay, I'll just answer this question. If you have this is a normal arrow function, right? And then I'm just going to console log. No, actually, I'm going to return x 42. Right. And then, if I try to log this, it should return 42 and it should log 42, right? Oh. Oops. Ha! There you go. I need to log it. Okay, this is embarrassing. It's because I'm running node, well, running the run. Sorry, it's just chug it up to the fever, right? Node function examples.js. There we go. 42 is logged because that is what returned from this function. The implicit return of the arrow function means that as long as it's only one thing I'm doing, one value, I don't need the return statement, which was your question, Jasmine. I could just do this. So
42 is log when I call it, when I invoke this function. Is that a proper answer to your question? I know that you can't write, can't talk. Is she saying yes in chat?
Just a follow-up question.
Okay.
But in F1, it's not an arrow function though, is it? It just returns a log. So everything within curly bracket is what's returned then.
Actually, no, I think I misunderstood the question. No, you don't need a return statement in a function. You don't need a function to return something. That's depends on how you use it and what you use it for. You can have a function that just does things, executes statements. You don't need a function always to return anything. So, for instance, if you just want to log the parameter, and I go F1 with test, right? It will just log test. But if I wanted to be able to use it in different contexts, like maybe I wanted to use the value, use whatever the function does somewhere else, I shouldn't log it. I should probably return it. Right. So now this just returns test, doesn't log it. So now I would need to obtain the same functionality, I would need to log whatever is returned. This should result in the same. But you don't need a return statement in a function. It's not required. It's only if you wanted to return something. Does that answer the question?
He says yes.
Okay. Let's move on. So next function, this one, this guy right here. Function, parameter, log the parameter. Is that a valid function? Is that going to give me squiggly lines?
Should be valid anonymous function.
I agree.
Good answer. So is it going to give me squiggly lines? Yes or no?
No.
Actually, it is. This might be a bit confusing, especially because I said that the name is actually optional. But you can't just declare a function without also giving it a name. If I did this, however, it's also not going to be valid. You can use this wherever a function is required. So you can use it as a callback function, but just this without a name, that's not going to work. Is that a little bit confusing? Yeah, it is. You're just going to have to use it a lot to get used to it. But if you just declare a function without a context, so not inside a different function or whatever, it does need a name, even though it's technically optional. I'm sorry if that's confusing, but it is how it is. Any questions about that?
I think it makes sense because you will never be able to use that function anywhere.
Yeah. So it's the compiler telling you, hey, dude, so what's up? But yeah, it makes sense, as you said, because you wouldn't be able to use it, and you can actually use the syntax if a function was expected. So, for instance, as a callback function. Should we take that one now? No, let's take it later. Okay, so this guy, is that a valid syntax?
I would say it is, but not if it's standing alone. I mean, like the other one.
So it's like this.
Yeah.
It's valid syntax, but not like this. Not how I'm using it here. Okay. Yeah, correct. This is not going to work. It will work if you use it just like the other one, but just on its own. Well, you have a function, but you're not using it, and you're not naming it. Okay. So this one, I think we actually had it just before. So is that valid syntax?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to show before, but I did it improperly. Yes, it is. So funny thing is, I'm just going to skip this one. Right. This is the const function that you know and love. Probably have used a lot in your projects because you could skip some TypeScript requirements with it. So the const f5 is equal to this function, and this is the key point that I'm trying to make. Really, is that these two ways of writing it is exactly the same. This right here that I've highlighted, that's a value that is a function. This right here is a value that is a function. It's completely the same thing. Difference is you can name a function, you cannot name an arrow function. You can actually go like this. Which is a bit weird. Why would you ever do that? But you can. Okay. How about last one? Promise. How about this one? Is that a function? The syntax is fine. I'm not getting squiggly lines, but is it a function? Take a wild guess.
Is it the function with the function call?
Yeah, that's right. This is not a function. It's a function call. This, of course, is. I'm hoping. I know it's a bit confusing, some of it, because we're passing over it so quickly. I do hope that this gives you a better understanding of what a function is and like just the intricate parts of it.
And Christian thinks it's an anonymous function call.
Sorry?
Christian asking, is it an anonymous function call?
Yes, it is. That's exactly this. An anonymous function is just a function that has no name. So, for instance, if I try to log this, right? It's an anonymous function. And if I go like this, probably going to say, yeah, undefined. There's nothing in it. Okay, but yeah, an anonymous function is really just a function without a name property, like we saw before.
So right here, you just call the method you just made, or
yes,
okay. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm calling it instantly because these yellow things, right? This one and this one. So what I talked about before is I'm saying do this first, right? Solve this, then move on. So I'm saying make this function, declare it, then call it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. If it feels abstract, I have actually used this knowledge of how functions work quite recently in my thesis, because people who are a lot more clever than me write frameworks, and using those frameworks in unorthodox ways, you got to know the basics, like the fundamentals. You got to know the grammar in order to write proper sentences. So it's not only a waste of time. Okay, let's move on. What I would like us to do now is I would like us to, in concert, write our own filter function. So you know this, let's do it here. You know this, probably know this filter function. Is there anyone who does not know what this is? No. I'm going to assume that's a no. So you all know what a filter function is. And how, someone tell me, speak up, how should I, what's the syntax? What do I pass to this function? What's the parameters that I give it? Someone wrote something in chat.
Someone wrote a callback function. Yasmin wrote a callback function.
Yeah. So a function. So you pass it a function here, right? Okay. So let's make our own. Just to explicitate and have an example of how you write these things. I'm going to start off and call it filter. I'm going to call it my filter. So this is a function that does nothing. Let's not go into what a prototype function is. The normal filter is a prototype function, meaning it exists on every array ever. You can just go array dot filter. That's a prototype function. So let's just make it as a regular function, meaning we're probably going to take an array that we need to work on. So anyone tell me, what should I write if I need to make a filter function that works the same way? Think about what kind of parameters does the normal filter function take? Someone just said it.
It takes a function.
It takes a function. Now, function is a keyword. We can't use that, but let's just call it. Actually, let's call it a callback. Okay, so we have the parameters array and callback, right? And the normal filter function, I'll just tell you, it returns an array containing the values that have gone through the filter. So we need to return an array, right? We also need to declare it. Now we have an empty array. And we also return that empty array. And then we take as parameters the array that we need to filter and callback function. In order to return the values in the old array based on whatever the callback function is, can you help me out here? What should I write? I will also accept questions related to this.
Christian has a bet in the chat.
Mhm.
But I think it's not real. Yeah, it's better to read it, I guess.
Mhm. Can you read it for me?
For each item, if start of parenthesis, callback another parenthesis item, parenthesis end, and then there's the body, basically new array push item, return new array.
Okay. So for each, I also need to, so for each item.
Yeah, if for each item, if callback item,
It's like this.
and the new array push item.
Mhm.
And then it just returns new array.
Okay. So there's some syntax problems here. This, I'm just going to say that this is on the right track. Does anyone dare to tell me how do we fix this?
You need to write array before for each, right?
Yes. And also for each is a function, right? This. So there we go. Okay. So for each, and then we have item. How does a for each work? Oh, that's wrong.
So for each element, do something.
Mm-hmm. For each is actually also a prototype function, kind of like filter. So what it does, it takes a function. If we wanted to write a function in here, just gonna copy paste this. So if we want to write a function in here, we just learned about functions. How do we write a function? Do we need it to have a name?
Not in this case.
Not in this case, no. So we don't need it to have a name. We can actually write an anonymous function. How would I write an anonymous function?
Do parentheses,
Mm-hmm.
maybe an arrow, and then do something.
And then do something. Yeah, this is an anonymous arrow function, right? So for each element, do something.
We haven't determined what we want to do, right?
What does a normal filter function do? Maybe it helps if I explain that. A normal filter function compares every element of the array to a Boolean, and then if it's true, it returns an array with that value.
Okay.
So we have the old array, that's the R, the pirate array. Now we have a function that does something on every one of them. And that function, when it's called, it takes the item as a parameter. So actually Christian had the correct notion here. You take the item as a parameter. Remember, this is the parameter part of the arrow function. And then we do something with that. Christian, you had the correct
way of thinking about it, just not maybe the correct syntax, which is easier in an IDE, of course. So what? Yeah, fine. Okay, so what do I do here? If someone other than Christian looks at what he wrote and then tell me, what should I do here? I have the item as a parameter. That's every single index of the array.
So he went if callback item, then new array. So it's if callback item, then new array that push item. Yeah.
Okay. Is that it?
That's what he wrote. He also wrote return new array, but you already had that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if that's it, let's test it. So we have the array up there, right? So let's just console log. Now my screen is on. Then we call my filter. What do I write now? If I want to filter this array using this function, what do I write inside this parentheses?
ARR.
Like this. What else?
Yeah.
What else?
You need a callback as well.
I need a callback. And what is that? The callback. What's the type of the callback?
Boolean. I mean, a function that gives you a Boolean. Or?
It's a function that returns a Boolean. Yeah. So we did that just before with the for each. Do I need it to have a name?
I would say no.
Not really. I don't need to reuse it. So I can make an anonymous function. How would I write that?
Parentheses.
Mm-hmm.
An arrow.
Where?
Right next to the yeah.
Yes.
And then I'm not sure. Maybe in the parentheses you need a put item in there. I'm not sure about that.
Mm-hmm. Let's try it.
And then let's say item bigger than 3.
Okay. So what should this return? What should get console log right now?
4, 5, 6, 7.
One second. Console.log is not a function. Ah, my God. Sorry. Wrong file. See it again. There we go. Perfect. Yes, thank you. So this thing right here, what is that? In this function, this inline anonymous arrow function, what is this? As a technical term, what is this within the parentheses? What is that?
It's the element we loop through in the for each loop.
As a concept. So this is a function.
Mm-hmm.
What is this?
This is a parameter.
It's a parameter. Yes.
Yeah.
And if that's a parameter, that's the abstract version, right? That's the recipe.
Mm-hmm.
What's the argument to this parameter.
That is what you call in the callback item in the function.
To what, this?
Yeah, I
Yes.
would say that. Yeah.
Yes, you're completely correct. This is the argument to this parameter. Is that confusing to anyone? This is about the nature of callback functions. So we already established that functions are values. So you can pass them along as parameters, as arguments, really. So this is the parameter, we call it callback. This is the argument to this parameter, right? So we pass it along a function, and then we call that function inside the other function. And of course, we need to make sure that it returns a Boolean, otherwise that will not work. This will not work. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
I have a follow-up question though.
Yes, please.
So I tried writing along, and I had so in the in line 16, what is on the right side of the arrow? I saw that as the body of the anonymous function. So I wrote it in curly brackets, and that did not work.
Yeah, let's try
Why?
this. This is again about the implicit return of arrow functions.
Okay.
So now this is the body.
Yeah.
If you just had a normal function, let's rewrite this actually as a normal function. You can do that. What's wrong with this function? What happens when you call this function up here? So you call the function on item.
It doesn't really return anything.
It doesn't return anything. You cannot imagine how many times I didn't see that I'd made this mistake and reused. Spent half an hour just raging about, why is this not working? This should work. It's JavaScript's fault. It's not my fault. And then it was because I had these brackets, but I did not have a return.
Okay.
Yeah. So don't get embarrassed if you get this wrong a lot, because if you do, I should also get embarrassed, and I don't want to do that. So does that make it more clear?
Okay, so what the arrow does is that it implicitly states that it should return whatever is on the right side of that. So,
yes.
The evaluation of that expression.
Yes.
Okay.
But only if you have one thing. Like if it just returns one thing. I mean, you could avoid these and then do more things, but you need to evaluate them before they're returned. You could do that with this one, but more easy, it's just make the brackets and then you can do more stuff, right?
And then write return.
And then write return in the end, yeah, because when you return something, the function's done.
So there's nothing wrong with having both an arrow and a body in curly braces with a return statement. That's okay also.
That's quite fine.
Okay.
And sometimes you need it because you need to do more than one thing, right?
Okay, cool.
But
thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Sure. Makes sense.
Yeah, good. So this is about the nature of callbacks, right? So if I hope that you have a better understanding of what a callback is, and how it's used, because it's used quite a lot of places. Like every event listener you ever created uses a callback function, which is also why I expect that some of you have maybe made the function of is taking a callback function from a function call. Like if you have in your React JSX, you might have a button and you might have an on click. So if you need to pass into a parameter to that function, you would go like this, right? But it doesn't take a function call. OnClick takes a function. And that's why this doesn't work. Because this is a function call. Does that make sense? I'm guessing it doesn't make sense. Okay, so this is actually an important point. So I'm gonna hammer on it a little bit. Something like onClick in a button takes a function, not a function call. And remember, there's a difference. The invocation of a function is not a function because it returns a value. So onClick requires a function. This is a function call. This is a function. Right. So what should I pass on to this onClick thing that you see often in JavaScript and React? You're very quiet.
Just my function.
Just my function. Yeah. Why?
Well, because it's the function itself.
It expects a function. Yes, that's completely correct. So what if I had some kind of value? Maybe I was mapping over an array and I have buttons. And when you click that button, I need to call my function with that specific value, right? So I need to call it with item. How will I fix this? This is a function call. I need to pass it a function. How do I make this into a function? The hint is in
You could make an arrow function again.
yes, and most of you have probably seen this. So this fixes it. Why does this fix it?
Because now it's a function that does something.
That does something, yeah. It's actually an anonymous arrow function that returns a function call. But this whole thing, that's a function, not a function call.
Mm.
And there's a very, very important difference to these two things. And if you don't understand them, you're gonna make this mistake quite often. Okay, I think we will move on. I also think that you guys are pretty tired because I'm getting less response than I did in the first half. Do you need like a break to get some water, stand up, do some exercise, anything?
Sure. I mean, I could use 5 minutes.
Okay, let's take 5 minutes and I'll continue and see if I can do asynchronous in 20 minutes. So I'm gonna resume at 20 to 2. Okay. Cool. Okay, resume recording. Let's talk about asynchronicity. I think that's a word. Asynchronous programming. What is that? Just a few words. Someone tell me what is asynchronous. What does that mean?
So it's possible to invoke some code without stopping the program. That could be one thing. I mean, you can go very deep into this, talking about threads and stuff, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Now you're talking, I think, more about parallel programming. Yes, the threads and all that's very, very advanced subject, and I will not go into that. What asynchronous is in JavaScript and in general is it's not chronologically executed, right? So you might be getting the result of an expression later than you expected. So if you have 3 expressions and one of them has a delay, it's going to go 1, 3, 2. That's basically what asynchronous means. So chronos is of course time, right? It's chronologically out of order. It's asynchronous. Blah, blah, blah. Words, fever. Let's move on.
I think Christian is writing something clever in the chat.
Yes.
He's saying allowing a function to work on a task without waiting for the answer.
Yes, that is that's how it's used often, but that's also sort of related to parallel programming. It's when you don't need it right away. How asynchronous in JavaScript is often used. It's related to APIs. So a program can be called a runtime, right? When you go click and the program executes, that's a runtime. So it does whatever it's supposed to do and then finishes. Unless, of course, you have something that, it's waiting for something, like a website. It's waiting for input. That's a runtime. So if you go, hey, API, either my own or something in the cloud, get me this data. That's a completely different runtime. So your code is going to go statement, 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 expression, 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 chronologically. And the other runtime is going to go, oh, I have a fetch request. Let me compute stuff, filter the list, return it. But this runtime doesn't know when this is done. Like it's 2 different programs. And that's what asynchronous is. So let me just return, let's see, an example of asynchronous. I'm going to fake it, which we can using the set timeout function. So we have value as a parameter, and then we're going to set timeout, and then we're going to return the value. Actually, it takes a function, so I'm just going to write function. Takes 2 parameters, a function and a number in milliseconds. So if I need to name it, of course. Just gonna call it my fetch fun. Now if I call my fetch, need to log it, of course, with test because my brain is tired. What's going to happen now is it's going to wait for 1 second, and then it's going to return a value. What should correctly? Ha! It does not. You know what? I'm just going to do it differently. So it's going to wait 1 second, and then it's going to console log the value, right? Because I'm not calling it. There we go. Live coding. There we go. Now it's working. Okay, so wait 1 second, and then it does something, right? So now I'm just simulating asynchronicity, right? So what happens if I try to log 1, 3, just like before I talked about? You see, it's out of order. So this occurs a lot on the internet, where you actually have to talk to servers and all that stuff. So obviously, developers needed a solution for this problem. You need to be able to have these in order, right? The old solution, the first one, was using callbacks. So you would actually send a function along with whatever asynchronous function you had. So whenever you're done with what you need to do, call this function on the value that you have generated. I'm going to show this is the basic idea. You pass it a callback function, and then when you're done, you call it on the value. I'm going to show you an example of this. This is quite prevalent in old code, in old APIs. For instance, if you want to make an extension for the Chrome browser using their extension API, it's all callbacks. And it is hell on earth. That's why they call it callback hell. It's ridiculous. You have like 100 lines long functions that has callbacks inside callbacks because you need more data. It's just ridiculous, but I'm going to show you how it works. So what you do is you have the callback function, just like before, and then you call it, right? So that's the basic idea of it. L here, of course, is the console.log method, just so you don't get confused. So I'm casting it a value and a callback function. Telling this function to, whenever you're done, simulated by the set timeout, with whatever you need to do, call it with this function. You could also just have a function that returned it, but let's see what it looks like. Okay, so it works. Now, how would I put these in order? 1, 2, 3. Anyone venture a guess? Okay, because I don't have a lot of time, I'm just going to tell you. What you can do is you can put whatever you need to do to happen inside the asynchronous function. So what I can do, and this is why it gets a little bit ridiculous. So whenever you're done with whatever function you need to do this in order, right? There you go. 1, 2, 3, all done after the delay. That's very, yeah.
Did you set this to be asynchronous anywhere, or how does it know this is?
No, I'm faking asynchronicity by using the set timeout. So if you imagine that I'm calling an API, and that API returns something to me after it's done commuting, and also there's lag and all that. So I don't know when I'm getting it back. I do know when I'm getting this back because I said it myself, but that's more of an example. I'm faking it. Yeah, I'm simulating that there's a delay. Okay, so that's the basic idea of a callback. Is you tell it to do whatever you want it to do when it has the data. So when my API is done, do all this. Right? It's a little bit more complicated than that, but you don't really need to know the specifics, especially because the new thing is promises. A promise basically does the same thing, except someone very clever abstracted the whole thing for you. So a promise is an object, and it's created like this, with a constructor, with the new keyword. And what you do is you give it a function. It takes a function as a parameter. I'm actually missing it. So let's try that. And the way that most APIs use it is they return it. So let's return new promise. And there you have, it takes two parameters. It actually takes three, but let's just use two. It takes something called resolve and reject. We're not going to use reject. You can do some like inline testing. See, is it okay? If not, just reject it. But the resolve we can use as the callback. So it's basically doing the same thing. It returns an object that you can use a little bit differently. So you don't get all these giant functions with lots of indentations. So this now, my fetch actually returns a promise. Just gonna, there we go. So whenever it's done, it resolves the value. There's loads of examples on how you would use this on the internet. I'm just gonna, again, because time almost running out, just gonna explain how, like, the concept of it. So when the timer runs out on this timeout, that should faking an API call. So when the API is done, it returns a promise. And then, no, actually, it returns a promise. And when it's done computing things, it resolves that promise. Which is why when you console log promises that you get from most APIs, if it's not resolved yet and you console log it, it will actually say unresolved promise in the console log. Okay. So let's call this thing on. Oops, it's not string. And of course it returns a promise, so I'm just going to say const p equal to this. Now we're going to log p. There you go. P is a promise, and at the time I'm logging it, it's pending. This is not done yet. So the very clever thing they made with promises is they have an implicit then method. Then is a function that takes a function. So it takes a callback function. And in the parameter, you can write whatever you want. It's usually written as data. So it takes the data. That data is whatever is resolved from value, right? And then you can do something with that data. You decide what you need to do it. Let's just log it. Okay. There you go. So now we're logging the data that gets resolved. This also means that we don't need to put things into all these all these callback functions. I realize that this may be getting a little bit convoluted. but we can actually just in the then function, we can put in our, like what we want to happen. 1, 2, 3. So then runs whenever the solved is called. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but Björn, do you need to make a const b, or can you just call then on my fetch?
Yeah, you can do that. This is a good question. Because this returns a promise, and then you go, well, that promise dot then. Just figure it might be a little more complicated for some people. But yes, this function returns a promise, and then you have that promise, and then you could just go then. Okay. The cool thing about these is you can actually chain them. So what you probably have seen is you get something as a string because it's an API in cat send, just complicated objects. So you get as a string, and then you go JSON.parse, or yeah, JSON.parse, but that also returns a promise. So don't mistake more thans as a normal thing. That's just because you have more than one promise. So what gets returned is also a promise when you go JSON.parse. Does that make sense?
So would you have more than one then in that case?
Nope. Well, in that case, yes.
Okay.
So if you have more than one then, that means that there's more than one promise. Because this then gets called when the promise is resolved. You can't resolve a promise more than once. This is something that confused me a little bit in the beginning. I thought that you usually had like more than one thens, so you can chain the then, but you can't. That's because you get more than one promise in. Okay, so important thing to know is you also have the catch, and the catch gets fired if reject is called. So if reject is called instead of resolve, then you have the error, which means that given that then includes logging 1 and 3, what will happen if I reject the whole promise? And anyone can guess what gets logged? Two. Because then is never fired, catches. Okay. Last one. I'm going to try and do it very quickly because I'm running out of time. Yeah. This is a recent addition to JavaScript. This is the async await keywords, and it's another level of abstraction. Whereas promises really does the same thing as a callback. Someone just wrote it into the language and made it easy for you. So does async await. Async await does the whole promise and resolve and all that, then does that for you. So the syntax is you have an async function. You need this async function, which also means that you can't use this in the root level. So I can't use it here, for instance. Right? I can't do something here. I need it to be inside a function. Okay. And then it uses the await keyword. Await really just means whenever, just wait. Stop the program. Wait for this to either be rejected or resolved. And that's it. So whatever line comes next, only executes after the promise has been resolved. So it's quite easy to use because you only really need this, and you can also use it for something other than APIs. But the basic principle is building upon promises that builds upon callbacks. So you can't have one without the other. It's a layer of abstraction each step, right? So
Ask you
yes,
something?
yes, please.
I have the assumption that if you use async and await, you will never need to use promises anymore. Is that right?
That is right, and is also wrong, because you don't need to write the promise yourself. But what async await does,
I know it does almost the same, but I would just say that yeah, we don't. I mean, making promises is an old-fashioned way. I mean,
so when you have the await keyword, it automatically makes what is awaited into a promise, and then it automatically resolves it. So it uses promises, but not in a way that you need to worry about when you use it.
yeah.
The reason I think you should know this, like what's going on in the engine room at some level of abstraction, is that you're a master student. Yeah, you're not someone who's been coding in his basement for a few months doing online courses. So you should know the theory behind this, simply because, well, I think you should. So yeah, I think that's I mean, unless I want to go over time, that's all the time I have. Just know that async await builds upon promises that abstracts away the whole callback thing for you. So then it's actually kind of a callback, right? Well, the thing inside of it is. I would love to answer more questions about it, but I did say till 12 to 2. So unless you want to continue, I'm just gonna stop it here.